You're all very welcome to Words on Whisky, episode 34. Before we start, we hit a milestone today, and I want to thank all our viewers, all of our listeners, all our downloaders, and everybody that has been on the show. We've hit a milestone of 5,000 downloads today. So thank you very much to everybody there that's helped make that possible. So today's show, we have a guest who is extremely well known in the US and has played a role in whiskey development, and particularly Irish whiskey development in the US and in Ireland and across the globe. So we're visiting Chicago, and our guest today is Martin Duffy, who is the Glencairn Brand Ambassador, Representative and Educator. So let's just bring in Marty and have a good chat. Good afternoon, Marty. How are you?
I'm fine there, Serge.
You're very welcome. All good, all good. I believe you're covered in snow out there in Chicago.
I am. It's up to my bollocks over here.
Yeah, cold. You now have a nice woolly jumper on anyway. That keeps you...
I do.
Yes, yeah. So how have you been keeping?
I'm keeping fine. In fact, the snow actually preserves me.
Yeah.
I go out. That's how I keep my youthful, persona. I go outside. I lay down in the snow, and just kind of hibernate. Yeah.
But I suppose you've been hibernating in some sense for the last year and a bit, almost.
Trying not to, but yeah.
Yeah.
Powers that be are trying to keep me in.
Chicago's in lockdown, is it?
It's coming out of a lockdown, so restaurants can have indoor dining again. Though also only down to I think like 25%. And unfortunately, it's been so hard on so many bars and restaurants that it'll be interesting to see how many bars and restaurants are left, and those that are left, will they reopen? Because they're afraid there will be another lockdown. Why bother? Yeah,
it's a similar situation. Obviously here as well, we're in severe lockdown now till March the 5th. And of course for Ireland, that's a big hit.
It pains me, man. It really does. Especially in Ireland. I mean, it's one of the things, first time I ever went over to Ireland many years ago was the great pub culture.
Yes.
I was in a little town called Carrigaholt over in County Clare.
Okay.
I love it. It was such a great little town. I think it was like 100 people, but there was 4 pubs, and everybody did a round robin every night at each pub.
And
I loved it. I got to know the whole town. Me and my brother, we'd walk down the street the next day, and the Duffy boys. Hello, Duffy. The Duffy boys.
So usually you come over once a year at least, anyway, here and do a little bit of a tour. But that's on the back boiler for a while yet, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it was always great. I always loved my jaunts over. I go over to Glencairn for a week.
Yes.
And then either a week or a few days, I pop over and go to Ireland.
You come over just to be in the car with me.
Yeah, which would basically sometimes turn out to be my entire time in Ireland.
Well, that was the last time. Yes, yeah. But obviously, there's a bigger connection with Ireland with the name Martin Duffy. What are your roots there, Martin? What's the Irish connection?
My folks are from my father's folks. Oddly enough, both my grandfather and my grandmother were from Mayo. Grandma was from Ballyhonus, and Grandpa was from Swinford. And even though they're only 10 miles apart, they didn't meet until they got over here to Chicago.
Right, okay. So it was your grandparents that came over. Yeah.
And actually, I'm looking into, now that most of the Irish records are online now, I'm going to see about trying to find my grandmother's birth certificate. I think I have to get my grandmother and grandfather's birth certificate, and then apply for dual citizenship.
Oh, okay.
Make it legal. I know I'm already kind of like an honorary citizen over there.
Yes, you are indeed.
At
Now,
least what
do you feel that way? Do you feel a tight connection with your roots?
I
Your
do.
Irish.
I mean, I love Ireland. I love the people. I think, the west coast of Ireland and the Highlands of Scotland are two of the most beautiful places on earth. But I think one of the beauties of Western Ireland is I would go over and see the Bridges of Ross
Yeah.
and a few others, and I'd be the only one there. I couldn't believe I had this beautiful coastline to myself.
Yeah.
I just love it. I'd go visit Doolin. When I
Yes.
worked at Guinness, I worked for Guinness for a couple of years, and on the weekends I had nothing to do. So if I wasn't traveling to other parts of Europe, I would take the time off and go over to Doolin and stay at a B&B and sit down in front of the pub, have a pint, and just stare out at the ocean and wondering what the folks back home were doing.
And you were out surfing, were you?
Yeah.
No, not your thing.
I did a boogie board once in California, and I had the black wetsuit on, and all I could think of was I just looked like a big, juicy seal to some shark.
Yeah.
I love looking at the ocean. I might put my feet in the ocean. That's about as much as I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, did you grow up then with Irish traditions and Irish upbringing when you're?
There's a lot of it. I mean, my grandmother had a thick Irish brogue, and my father loved Ireland. My father got hit by a truck as a little kid, and this is back in the 1920s. And the doctors weren't sure he was going to pull through, so they told my grandmother to go to take him out to the country, get him out of the city.
Yeah.
And so oddly enough, they couldn't afford to go out into the country. So she booked a journey back to Ireland. And so she took him back to Ireland. It really made a huge impression on his mind. He loved it. And so as soon as he could afford to, he started going back. And this is probably not until the 1970s.
Yeah.
But he would go back maybe every 4 years and visit his uncle Martin, who I'm named after.
Yes.
Martin Finnegan in Ballyhonus. And so as soon as I could afford it, I'd go over and I try to go over as many times as possible. I love it.
Yeah. Of course, the city of Chicago is a hugely popular place with the Irish there as well. So, and the thing about the Irish abroad is that they're more Irish than the Irish at home.
Huge. I think I think it's 40 million. At one point I thought it said 40%, but that couldn't be. I think it's 40 million Americans can claim some Irish heritage.
Yeah. Oh, I will believe it.
The US. Yeah. That's nuts. And you can probably find the vast majority of them in New York, Boston. Actually, you know what? One of the most Irish places on earth is Butte, Montana.
All right. Okay. I don't know how they ended up there.
An Irish immigrant started a copper mine there.
Right.
And he sent out word to his fellow Irishmen, come work here, I'll treat you well.
Yeah.
They did, and I believe there and Kansas City, I understand, two places that have one of the largest St. Patrick's Day parades.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the numbers of Irish out there is huge. And was drink a big part of the culture growing up then in Chicago?
Well, yeah. Actually, it's amazing on the you don't see it as much, but you can find remnants of it in the old Bridgeport area, which was the home of about 10 different Chicago mayors, all Irish.
Yeah.
You can still see the corner pubs, and that was a huge part of the socialization in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Every block would have a pub at the end, and that's your pub. That's where you go to. And there's one that's still over there. It's not too far from Sox Park. You go, and up until recently, they would have all these pictures of all these kids, baseball teams, little league baseball teams on the wall. And you look at the kids, and then you look at the bar, and all those little kids are now old guys drinking at the bar. So, they didn't go far from home. There's that. I often tell folks about, when I was sick, my mom used to take Irish whiskey and make a giant pitcher of hot toddies.
All right. Nice.
And that was just for me. She'd make you drink the whole thing. And I actually kind of look forward to getting sick.
Yes, yeah. Was that your introduction to spirits?
It was, but I mean, at the same time, I had no idea what the heck I was drinking. I knew that was alcohol, and I knew if I tried, my folks would have adult parties. Now, when I say adult parties, I don't mean nudie parties. Right. I mean, there was all the adults, all the aunts and uncles, and we had an unfinished basement. And they throw a towel over the washer and dryer, and that became the bar. Right. And so the next morning, they hadn't cleaned up yet. I'd go down there, and I'd mix myself up a cocktail, something, and it was really just taking a little of everything. I couldn't stand it by itself. I'm talking a little kid. But, man, when my mom made those hot toddies, I just thought they were so good. It wasn't until I was in high school, a buddy of mine had this powdered mix that you made whiskey sours with.
Ooh.
And we used to drink whiskey sours in his driveway. And
were they good?
He did a very good job. He was very good. Yeah, he followed the directions to the nth degree, and they're delicious. And that's really, then from then on, any wedding I went to, it seemed like you can always order a whiskey sour. And the bartender didn't care how old you were. Or maybe because it was a wedding, they figured, who cares? And so I was drinking a lot of whiskey sours. Then as I got older, you might do a Jack and Coke, but I was never a big Coca-Cola fan. Yeah. So maybe I'd switch to 7-Up. Then I thought, this is all too sweet. And it wasn't until my Uncle Chuck passed away. My Uncle Chuck always smelled like Manhattans.
Right.
So my brother and I decided when we heard the news that Uncle Chuck had passed away, we toasted him with some Manhattans at a bar. And I tasted this, and I go, that is really good. So Manhattan became my new drink. I drank that for a couple of years, then weaned myself off the vermouth. Started drinking bourbon neat, then moved from bourbon to Scotch. I had some Springbank 21-year-old at this bar I was working at, and I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then it was funny. Irish whiskey had lost a lot of a big foothold here in the U.S. I mean, you'd find it in some of the Irish pubs, especially on the south side of Chicago. Western Avenue had a string of Irish pubs. But, most people did shots of Irish whiskey.
Yeah, I believe still a very large percentage of Irish whiskey is in shots.
Yeah, I always thought Jameson really, really, the vast majority of it is consumed in college towns as shots. Because a lot of college kids see Irish whiskey, and there's still that perception among younger folk that Irish whiskey is this really rugged and tough. Yeah. Where I always thought Irish whiskey, eventually I just thought Irish whiskey is like a little pussycat.
Yeah.
It's so gentle and sweet. Come here, little wet nose and a little furry head. Irish whiskey.
When did you actually start in the drinks business then? I mean, you started as a bartender.
Actually, I started as a server back in the 80s. I was a server and a bouncer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Not much of a bouncer. most of the people I would have to bounce if they... Luckily, there was a law that you couldn't touch anyone.
Right, okay. That's an easy job for a bouncer.
Yeah, that actually helped me, yeah. So, can't touch them, but I can tell you, get out. But then I went to work at this 4 a.m. bar in Chicago. And I'd work from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m., 5 on Saturdays. And that was about 1990. So I bartended there for 3 years, moved on to a restaurant for another 3 years, worked in a hotel, a couple of jazz clubs. And it was about 96 that I saw an ad in the paper. Johnny Walker was looking for guys and gals to run around in kilts and run into the bars and buy people drinks. And so I said, signed up. You know, the other thing too, Serge, is that nowadays you have brand ambassadors coming out of the woodwork. But back then there were no brand ambassadors. There's very little resources to learn about whiskey. So when I saw this, it provided training on whiskey.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was a big thing for me.
And was it always whiskey in particular that you were interested in?
Well, I'm still a big gin lover. I always loved gin. I used to drink dirty gin martinis, especially Tanqueray dirty gin. That was mine. Let's see, was there any? I went through a tequila phase. I went through a rum phase. And I still love them all. I really like most spirits, but whiskey, there's something about whiskey that, you know, there's an attachment to the land where they're made. Yeah. You know, drinking a bourbon in Kentucky just is, I don't know, there's something to it. When I drank Talisker on the Isle of Skye, I guess I had an epiphany. I just go, oh my God, this is why this whiskey tastes this way. And then,
we did have that description from Dave Broom describing a whiskey as important because of its people and place.
Yeah, huge. I mean, it's, and you think about it. I mean, you'll have millions of tourists coming to Ireland to visit those distilleries, or, you know, obviously they'll visit Guinness, which I always thought of Guinness as being a very unique beer. You know, I don't think there's a lot of breweries out there that people go, oh my God, I got to go visit that brewery. But Guinness, yes. Yeah. But whiskey, people come from all around to go to Scotland, Ireland, Kentucky. Yeah. I mean, there's something about it that you don't see with, I mean, how many people are flocking to the local Smirnoff distillery?
No, I don't see that happening very much.
Yeah, and we have a Smirnoff distillery in just southwest of Chicago. I think one of the biggest.
When you started off, you obviously the bar trade would have given you a great grounding in spirits generally, but to be a brand ambassador, it's not only the spirit. You need to know how to deal with people, how to have a persona around them, and how to educate. So, I mean, that's one of your roles even now. Yeah. You have been a huge educator, and certainly, you know, I listen to your podcast, which we'll talk about later on, and learn a huge amount from those as well. But what skills did you bring from bartending to the role of brand ambassador that you had with Diageo and Johnny Walker?
Well, you know, it goes back even a little further. So I actually initially was going to become an actor. And so I got into acting. I went to school for acting. I did some Second City work. So I was doing a lot of improv in the 80s. And that helped me with getting behind a bar and feeling comfortable talking to folks, you know. And then later on, when it came to all the promotional stuff, I mean, before there were brand ambassadors, we were really just promotional samplers. But they were looking for promotional samplers who had no problem walking up to some people in a bar and chatting them up, talking to them and getting them to try a whiskey, you know, being persuasive in a very small amount of time. Sometimes we go into a bar, we're supposed to talk to as many people as we could in 15 minutes and buy them a drink. Yeah. Go to the bar. But it went on, and I started doing presentations. Wanted me to present to 150 people. It became 2 sessions a night to 400 people. It was really about just explaining the passion. And anyone who becomes brand passionate turn down gems, for vodka and even gin. I mean, I just can't go on and talk about gin. I like drinking it, but it doesn't have the history. It doesn't have the story.
Sure.
But you're just getting people, revved up. This is something kind of cool. This glass of whiskey is history in a glass. If it's a 10-year-old whiskey, that means this was made 10 years ago. 10 years ago. If you're now drinking age, say you're 21, you were 11 when this was first made. Actually, Jack McGarry, I was doing a training at the Merchant Hotel when Jack and Sean were still there.
Up in Belfast, yeah.
And I remember I was doing a Bushmills tasting, and we got to the 21-year-old, and Jack, and then he just downs it. And I go, dude. I think at the time he was like 19 years old. I go, that whiskey is it's your senior. It's your elder. It's older than you. Treat it with respect. Yeah. Now, of course, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, what makes a good story then when you're trying to persuade somebody to convert to a particular spirit?
Well, I mean, I think in fact, that's a good question, because obviously you have a lot of whiskeys out there, and a lot of whiskeys are new, so they don't have a big long history. Yeah. But then you have the story of the person who made it, the person who risked everything to start a distillery. You think about some of the people who've gone out. I mean, I was going to do a booklet, kind of a guide for Illinois distilleries at one point. Just an idea I had. I was going to work with a buddy of mine who's a journalist. So we started off and we went out to interview some of these distillers, and it was just kind of a mind-opening thing. I didn't even think about it before, that almost everybody we talked to, none of them were from the drink industry. There was one guy who was used to be or still is a scientist. There's one guy who was a former pro golfer, former lawyer. There are two brothers, the Blunt brothers, out of beautiful Galena, Illinois. Mike used to work for the NSA, the National Security. What is that? What's the last name? Not associated.
Agency. Advisory.
Yeah. Agency. And then his brother Matt used to sell nuke parts.
Right.
Both those guys should be on a watch list. But I mean, it's funny that they I think they've been in business for 6 years maybe now. But they started off, they found an old Mormon church, built the distillery inside of it. I mean, it's just kind of a funky little fun story.
Yeah.
And how they just gave up their old life to start this whole brand new life. And I always found that really, really interesting. And I think that carries over into their whiskey,
Yeah. But I mean, you have to have a strong interest in it, as well as a strong knowledge in the whiskey you're talking about, to be able to persuade other people to try it.
I do. I will tell you, I guess nowadays, because people have gotten into whiskey so much where they have broken it down to the atom.
Yeah.
They need to know every little single tiny little thing. And it kind of boggles my mind, because I go, you're drinking this, right? You're not trying to fuse it with some alien life form, are you? I mean, it's just you're still drinking it.
Yeah.
It's about enjoying it. But we just had Pat Heist on our show from Wilderness Trail yesterday, and he's a expert on yeast, and we had the biggest audience we've ever had.
Yes.
People really want to know this. Now, true, a lot of folks in the industry. There were a lot of folks in the distilling trade, but even your average consumer. I went to a bourbon tasting, kind of a group that got together in Bardstown, Kentucky once.
Yeah.
And these people already knew how to decode all the print, the tiny invisible print on the side of the bottle, which told you exactly what batch, at what date, and what time it was. And so they were comparing bottles that were made on the same day and seeing if they were different. I go, really? This is not what, to me.
Has it gone too far? Has it gone too?
I think so. I think this is not what whiskey was created for.
Yeah.
Whiskey was, I mean, think about it. 200 years ago, you go with some guy in Ireland is making his whiskey, right? He's making it today, right? He made it this morning and maybe last night to enjoy tonight.
Yeah.
Right? He's not, he's not going, I'm picking up apricots and little Pokemon tears and all. It's to me, it's nuts that we've gotten to this point where we have to dissect a whiskey so much. Though at the same time, maybe I'm the one, the one who's wrong. Maybe it is about breaking.
Well, I mean, you will have seen the market. So when did you start that role with Diageo as the senior brand ambassador?
As the senior master of whiskey, please get the title right.
Emeritus.
Yes, Emeritus. You're the one who added the Emeritus.
Yes, why not?
No, I suppose it's true.
Blame Fionn.
I started part-time in 1996, September 1996. And I did that for part-time for about 7 years. In the meantime, I worked a bunch of other whiskey brands. Yeah. So, and this is back when it was United Distillers, Guinness, UBV. And over here, it was known as Shefflin Somerset. So I was actually working on some of the other brands. It's one of the reasons I really grew to love Tanqueray, is Tanqueray was part of the portfolio. And I would do events for Tanqueray and Ciroc Vodka eventually. But also we had Dewar's and all the Dewar's single malts, Aberfeldy and all those were all part of it. It wasn't until 2002 they wanted 7 masters of whiskey across the country. So Steve Beal out in San Francisco, Rick Edwards, who is now with Strand of Hands, Marcy Rudershausen, who was a German Bolivian gal living in Miami, and a couple other folks. We were the 7 original masters of whiskey, and as far as I know, we were the first American brand ambassadors, whiskey brand ambassadors. Before us, it was a number of Evan Katnack and Gordon Bell, and a number of other retired distillers from Scotland would come over, and we were supposed to replace them. So they sent us over to Scotland. We did the Malt Advocate course at Royal Lochnagar, which was pretty darn cool. Yeah. And so they trained us up. We learned a lot, but not everything. Marketing spiel. Yeah. We wanted to get behind the marketing spiel. We wanted to know all the facts. We wanted to know everything. But I think they were afraid to let us know everything, because then we go out and we might spill some beans that we weren't supposed to. Anyways, we were supposed to start on January 2nd, 2003, our brand new full-time gig. And I just turned to the local Shefflin market manager and said, what am I supposed to do? I mean, you trained me on the knowledge of the whiskey, but now what? She said, just make the role your own, really. Yeah. Really? Okay. So luckily, she was able to set me up with ride-alongs with some of our distributor reps, and it took a long time in dealing with bar owners and people, and not really knowing what my role was exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, you didn't have anybody to learn off. You'd nobody to copy. I mean, you were all, in a sense, you were the trailblazers of whiskey brand ambassadors at the time. There was nobody else really out there.
I mean,
Nowadays, it's changed so much.
oh yeah, I mean, well, nowadays it's very interesting. I will run. So we were both educator. We did the big consumer events, but we also were expected to work with the distributors as far as training them. Anytime a sales rep had a problem with an account, like he wanted to sell these single malt whiskeys in. He didn't know what a single malt was. This is, the early aughts. It's funny how many people nowadays just think, oh, this has been like this forever. Yeah, there was always single malts, but
nobody was buying them.
and nobody over here in the States, single malt Scotch didn't really come over until the early 60s. Glenlivet and Glenfiddich were the first two. And even then, I remember my folks would have bottles of it, but they just called it Scotch.
Yeah,
it was no different than the Cuddy Sark that was on that washer dryer bar down in the basement. And then Macallan came in the 80s, and they started driving the whole idea of a single malt. And then the classic malts came in about 87, 88.
Yeah, I mean, they really played a huge role, those classic malts. I mean, it was like a great move from Diageo.
I thought so. I mean, the whole idea of regionality, even though a lot of it's been either debunked or it doesn't really come into play as much anyways now. I mean, island whiskeys, you have unpeated island whiskeys and you have peated Highland whiskeys. So that whole kind of thing is kind of gone the way of the dodo bird.
Is it still part of the marketing message to the Scottish regions, or is that gone now?
I think it's gone. I mean, even the classic malts are basically gone as a group. We had Nick Morgan on the show 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And I was bemoaning the fact that really they only promote Oban, Talisker, and Lagavulin, the three big sellers. That the classic six, and then their cousins, Clynelish and Kalila, and some of the others that they've released in recent years. They're not really sold as a group anymore. You don't really hear them talking about, the Highlands, Lowlands, Islands, Western Highlands. And a lot of it was marketing. I mean, they had the Isle of Skye as a region. Isle of Skye isn't really a region. It's part of a region, if you want to talk about island malts. But, giving it its own region, especially since Talisker was the only distillery on the island for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it's very evident that you learned about, obviously, all the Diageo products, but learning about all those other products as well from different distilleries is a huge standing. And, your depth and width of the knowledge out there on what's available is huge. But where was Irish at the time?
Again,
and where was bourbon?
Well, bourbon, I remember kind of witnessing the rebirth of bourbon, to me anyways, growing up in Chicago and starting my bar career in the early 90s, was really the Beam small batch collection.
Right.
Booker's, Basil Hayden, Knob Creek. Those were, in fact, I used to drink, I went to this one bar after work and would have Booker's Manhattans. Yeah. Straight up. And it was a 10-ounce cocktail glass. Yeah. And I had, and at that time, we knew about strength, the strength of ABV and the proof of a whiskey, but didn't really understand it, really. Yeah. So I knew this was the strongest one. So I said, that's what I want. I'll have that. And so I didn't realize, that was 125 proof whiskey. 120.
Yeah, Booker's still producing fantastic whiskey out there, Booker's.
But I'd have 3 of those in the night. that's 30 ounces of 126 proof bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That's a good night.
Well, there was many. There's many of those good nights ended up in a weird kind of whitish green haze. I
Right.
don't. It just so. But you know what? It was so damn tasty. They were really good. Anyway, so there was bourbon, and there weren't a lot of other big brands coming along that were huge in the 90s. So Manhattans were making a nice comeback.
Yeah.
I started working at a hotel bar in downtown Chicago, and those and vodka martinis
Right.
were the two big things. But Irish whiskey, again, you had Bushmills and Jameson. Tullamore. I didn't even really see it that much back then. Was there anything else? Even Powers you might find in some of the old man bars.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really spoken of much.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see what I believe, and Serge, you probably know more about this than I do because I've only heard this, but I had been told that in the 1990s, about 96, or right in there, that Pernod only had so many marketing dollars for Bushmills and Jameson, so they decided, well, let's put all our eggs in one basket, and they put it behind Jameson.
Yeah, that's
that's
very
why
true.
Jameson took off, and Bushmills just stayed flat. And by the time Diageo bought it, it was still kind of, people are still drinking it, and it did have its loyal following, but and oddly enough, it's funny. If you watch a lot of movies from the 90s, if you watch The Verdict with Paul Newman, you'd see, I believe he drinks Bushmills in that. So I noticed in a lot of movies, Bushmills was actually getting a lot of good product placement, but it was Jameson that took off. And, they did all sorts of things. The pickleback. Did you guys ever hear about that over there?
Can't say I have, no.
That was one of those things they pushed in college towns. Jameson with a pickle juice.
Right. Okay. Well, it worked.
Well, yeah, it was huge.
But who was drinking the whiskey back then? Was it an older generation drinking bourbon, Scotch, and Irish whiskey, or?
Well, no bourbon. At least the bars I was going into, bourbon was finding a younger crowd. I mean, true that the cocktails were mostly in cocktails.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, Manhattans were really making a comeback. I think Irish whiskey was still the old man's choice. You'd find those in the old man bars. Scotch you started seeing, especially single malts. You saw among young white collar workers.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting when I started doing more events, especially the big consumer events. I talked to people either before or afterwards.
Yeah.
It was really interesting that young men would tell me that they wanted to aspire to be like their bosses. They saw their bosses drinking single malt Scotch.
Right. Okay.
And what was single malt Scotch? And you still see it today. The age statement, the price tag. So you know that people were, it was a status symbol. Yeah. Right. And later, bourbon, and now even to a certain degree, Irish whiskey has had that same kind of, that same kind of thing where the older whiskey, the more expensive whiskey, this is what everyone's kind of going for, which I always think is so stupid. There's so much great whiskey that's very affordable. I spent a lot of money on it. You do realize you go to the bathroom in about 20 minutes afterwards, right?
Don't tell people that.
Yeah, well,
Don't tell people that. But so where do you see the Irish whiskey in the American landscape now? How has it changed, and where does it stand now?
well, it's interesting. I mean, bourbon has taken bourbon has really jumped out in front as far as what I see and read.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it still has a ways to catch up to Scotch, just because Scotch has had such a huge resurgence over the last 30 years. Bourbon's resurgence has really been over the last 12, 15 years. Yeah. Even though it started in the 90s, I really, all the various whiskey brands. And now, too, you've got so much competition. I mean, you have now 2,000 distilleries in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a huge number. It's amazing.
I mean, I think it was 200 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So now, not only do the big brands have to compete against the smaller brands, which might be, a lot of them are doing a lot of really cool, innovative stuff. And then you got different categories of American whiskey. It's not just bourbon.
Sure. Yeah.
You got the American single malt.
Is that the one that's buzzing at the moment? American single malt or rye as well?
Yeah, rye whiskey has been hot, especially with mixologists over the last 10 years. Once they found out the original Manhattan was made with rye, everyone ditched their bourbon and went with rye. And when I was a bartender, we only had one rye whiskey behind the bar, and that was Old Overholt.
Yeah. We have a question in here actually from Graham Fraser, and he's asking, why did Diageo not get involved with Irish whiskey earlier?
Well, you know what? Diageo has always been an odd beast to me, even though I was literally in the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
For 14 years. They could have been in bourbon in a big way. They had Stitzelweller. So when Diageo formed over the course of I think it was 97 when Grand Metropolitan merged with Guinness.
Yes.
And then a few years later, Diageo and Pernod Ricard divvied up Seagram's, which was the largest distiller in the world. They had the Stitzelweller distillery. They could have had MGP. Yeah. I think they could have had Four Roses distillery. They sold it all off, except for the one distillery that was already shuttered, Stitzelweller. They kept that, which, had a lot of whiskey aging in it, but actually they didn't even benefit from that. They didn't benefit from the Pappy Van Winkle that was aging there. They didn't like, this is what I was told, since it was a UK-based company, they really didn't want to deal with the property over in the US. They didn't really want to deal with owning buildings and such. So they sold Four Roses, but they kept the Bullet Bourbon brand, which was made at Four Roses.
Right, okay.
All right. And they did make, it wasn't too long after Diageo, bought up Seagram's. And it was about 2005, I want to say.
Yeah.
2004, 2005, that they bought Bushmills from Pernod Ricard. And I was personally really excited about this. Good, an Irish whiskey. Oh, now you're talking. This is great, some juice from the motherland. But, it wasn't too long after that that I moved over to Ireland. And it was really weird to me. We had celebrated the 400th anniversary of Guinness, of Bushmills, or the licensed distill.
Yeah.
Here in Chicago, we had Cullen Egan. We brought him over. We put him in the middle of Soldier Field. We had 400 people holding little electric candles.
All
We
right.
marched him out with an Irish pipe band behind him, and he toasted and everything. We had this big thing. Then I go over to Dublin a few months later, and on the actual date of that license to distill, I want to say it was April 25th. I'm not as up on my knowledge as I used to be. I asked the guys in the office, "Hey, did you guys do anything yesterday?"
Yeah, it was an amazingly quiet 400th anniversary of the license. All right. Yeah, I remember it myself.
They had a picnic. I guess the distillery crew had a picnic, and that was about it. And I thought, really? And I tried to instill in those guys. I mean, I was just a voice in the wilderness search. I was. I tried to instill them. And I go, as goes Ireland, as goes the United States, or so goes Ireland, as goes the United States. Whatever. How is that ever put together? I told them, look, guys, a lot of Americans come over here as tourists, and they go back and tell everybody, oh, this is what the Irish do. This is what the Irish drink.
Yeah.
And what were they coming and seeing? They were seeing Jameson all over Temple Bar or Powers. Yeah. And they assumed Powers was more, right? And that's the same thing. They got, that's how Green Spot became this hot thing. Oh, they have that in Dublin. You can't get it anywhere else. Got it in Dublin. Even patties. Everyone wanted patties over here because they have it all over Ireland. But once it got here, it didn't. Really.
Is there that sense of Americans looking for the genuine Irish article? I think and bringing it over.
And, people talked about Guinness itself, that it tastes so much better. Yeah, it's very true, but it has a lot to do with the fact that I might be drinking it I might be drinking it at Brazen Head, which is 2 blocks from the brewery, and those guys, if they wanted to, they just call up and say, "Hey, we're running low. Can you get another keg that just came off the line?" Plus, Guinness in Ireland was going around making sure lines were clean and everything else, and that things were being done properly. Where you don't get that in the States, so your pints are always going to be a little off over here.
Yeah. So you came over here in 2008 for a couple of years. What were you doing here?
That's what I keep on asking myself. It was great. I got recruited. My friend Gregor Katnak was golfing. He was the global brand ambassador for Johnny Walker in Scotland. And a fellow who worked at Guinness by the name of Emmett O'Brien, who I think you might know. Do you know Emmett? He lives over in Galway.
Who did we go and visit when you were over last time? I remember we went down to Limerick.
That was Lorcan Murphy. He was one of my regional reps. He was great. I loved working with Lorcan. But anyways, Emmett said, "Hey, we need someone to come over and talk spirits and cocktails to the Irish bar trade." And it's funny. I don't know if I should say this, but I guess it's all right. He doesn't work the same way. He was saying they want an American because they said they couldn't find anyone in Ireland. But I think they weren't looking at the right places, because there were some really talented people in Ireland at the time. But they thought a Yank, especially a Yank with an Irish last name, would do a lot better than an English guy coming over.
Quite possibly.
I think so. Well, I think some of it might have been a little, the older Guinness guys. All the reps over there were all in their 40s. They only knew about beer. They knew nothing about. I mean, it's funny. I couldn't believe they sold nearly 900,000 cases of Smirnoff vodka in Ireland.
Yeah.
I mean, that blew me away. And yet most of them couldn't tell you word one about Smirnoff. I thought, how do you sell this? I guess it just sells itself. So they needed someone to come over. I came over. It was a little bit of a shock to me. I was asked to make some cocktails behind this one bar down in Cork, where these guys, the bar tenders there were fantastic at making cocktails, but the bar setup was very different. And I wasn't a big speed guy. My specialty wasn't mixology. Yeah. In fact, I didn't even know I had only heard the word mixologist once in all my time in the U.S. and prior to that, and I laughed when I heard it. I just thought, "Oh, are you joking? You're a mixologist. Why not just call yourself a bartender?" But it was huge, and I failed on my first try. Trying to make these cocktails because they had all these mixers and things, and nothing was labeled, and it was horrible. But I came into my own eventually. I realized my shortcomings, and very rarely would try making the cocktails anymore, and just talk about spirits. And that obviously there was a huge lack of training out there, especially on the Diageo brands. I just couldn't understand a company so huge, and they had nobody within the company who could talk about the spirits or talk about cocktails.
Yeah.
So eventually it was a little bit of a culture shock, but it was fun. And it was eventually became really easy once I realized that, like the Cosmopolitan was one of the biggest cocktails.
Yeah. So how far ahead was the States in terms of cocktails to Ireland?
Real far.
Really big difference. Yeah.
I mean, there was an interesting thing, and I don't know if it's still the case. Probably is. Maybe you guys are still with only 2 units. You're limited to 2 units in a cocktail?
I don't know what the measurements are actually anymore. No,
yeah.
I don't.
So, like, I remember, I thought it was interesting that you couldn't. People were afraid of a Long Island iced tea, right? Because that's too much alcohol. That's too much. I go, really? It doesn't have to be. You can pre-mix it, and if it's 2 units, that means you just stay within that much, and you put your vodka, your gin, your rum, your tequila. And most people didn't have tequila, or your Cointreau. And then sour mix and Coke. It's very simple. But it just seemed like... and then also, if you came over here during that time, almost any bar could make you some basic cocktails.
Yeah.
But I believe it was the Bleeding Horse.
Oh, yeah.
I love that name.
Yeah.
For a pub.
I frequented it a couple of times as a student. Yeah.
I love the Bleeding Horse pub. He wanted to sell cocktails, and I was trying to set it up for him so he could, and just make real simple, basic ones, Nothing, you make a Cape Cod, basically, vodka and cranberry, what's a Madras was a vodka, cranberry, and grapefruit juice. Real simple stuff. And he just said, "Oh my God, it's taking so long to make that one cocktail. I could be making 3 pints."
Yeah.
Well, actually, don't your pints take 2 minutes? 4?
Well, yeah, you could argue that. Yes.
You should be able to make 3 cocktails in 2 minutes. It should be really, really simple, very basic. And so it was funny just trying to get over that hump. And, selling whiskey, selling Bushmills, trying to get Bushmills into Dublin was interesting. It wasn't as bad as I thought in some ways. I thought that whole Proddy whiskey, I don't know if they call it Proddy whiskey over there, but over here in the U.S., you go to places in Boston and Chicago, and you have some Dingleberry who go, I'm not going to carry that Proddy whiskey.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, thankfully those days are gone now.
Well, they were never here in the U.S., is why I always thought it was so funny. I grew up in a very Catholic neighborhood. You know, I never saw anybody have a problem with Protestants or Protestant or whiskey that's made in a predominantly Protestant country. Really?
Yeah.
You drink scotch, don't you? You have a bunch of scotch on your back bar. I wonder what religion those guys are.
Yeah.
It's like, just get over it, would you? I had to beat a lot of people up, Serge.
I'm sure.
Was
Well, that's where the security guard experience came in handy.
yes, the bouncer and me would come out. Yeah, it was tough.
Could you, when you were here, did you see any seedlings of Irish whiskey starting to develop? 2008 was still early days, I suppose.
Well, I mean, obviously John Teeling had already gotten, the Cooley distillery had been up and running for about 20 years at that point. And he had already started doing stuff over in Kilbeggan.
Yeah.
It's funny, in my 2 years there, I never met anyone for Pernod Ricard or IDL. Never.
Really?
Never ran into anybody. Except if I went to the Jameson Museum, but even then, I don't know if I ever met any of the brand people. But I thought, do they have a counterpart? Is there a whiskey brand ambassador? But, as far as I know, there wasn't at the time. But I ran into Oliver Hughes when he was still looking for funding.
Yeah.
Jingle. I don't know of anybody else. I don't know if anyone else had. Well, I guess the guys in at West Cork had supposedly been doing stuff, but I never heard of anything down there.
Yeah, so it was still early days at the time, but you didn't get a sense that Irish whiskey was going to be the next big thing at any point, or even from the States?
No, not really. And like I said, I was really trying to campaign for Bushmills to open up their vaults of old stuff.
Yeah.
I never got to see it. I never got to taste it. I just knew that the anniversary bottling had some crystal malt, and said, well, hey, wait a minute. That means you distilled some crystal malt around here, right? Mm-hmm. So that's in the warehouses. And I talked to Colin about it. I said, it's too much trouble. The brand really doesn't want to release that stuff. And all I could think of is Bushmills could have been the Buffalo Trace of Irish whiskey.
I think Tay Logjan is talking about the trip to Powerscourt when we almost made it over. So Jason, I presume.
Yeah.
Hello, Jason. Welcome. You're welcome anytime to come and have a lift in the back of my car. I'm sure you have fond memories.
Make sure you have a lot of Dramamine with you, Case, so you don't get car sick again.
Yeah.
Good times. Your car is either a cross between a car and a blender.
It is now the way the state it's in at the moment. But yeah, how have you seen the role of the brand ambassador change?
Well, it's funny. For the big brands, the people I've seen are mostly, they're not involved in sales as much as I was. I got eventually, and it was kind of a downer in a way because initially it was fun. You were treated like a VIP, and a lot of people confuse the master of whiskey with like a master distiller.
Yeah. So
a lot of people are expecting me to, if I was talking about single malt Scotch, they're expecting me to have a Scottish accent. If I was talking about Bushmills, they thought I was coming from Bushmills. I should have an Irish accent. And sometimes I would. I'd put on a fake accent initially and then drop it on them just to show, come on, I'm a kid from the southwest side of Chicago. But nowadays, the big brands, a lot of them seem to be strictly consumer facing. They'll do the big events. They seem to have a lot of free time in my opinion, compared to what we had to do.
Yeah.
When I was working, and I don't want to sound like, but in my day,
Yeah. It wasn't a million years ago.
but we were, I was out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
I mean, at least at night, you go to bars, you go to restaurants, you support the brand. My poor little liver took a beating.
Yeah, does it take a toll, actually? We talk about the brand ambassador and the well-being of brand ambassadors because, there's a lot of late nights. There can be a fair amount of drinking. Do you think brand ambassadors are looked after well enough on that side of it?
I don't know. Maybe some of it was due to that, where these the big companies were thinking, let's not have any situations where somebody's over imbibing or feeling like they have to go out, hit 5 bars a night, 5 nights a week, because it does take its toll on you. As I was getting older, I really did, eventually some of those next mornings took a little longer to recover.
Yeah.
And I tried never to get drunk. I never believed in getting drunk. I never liked being drunk. I like the taste of whiskey, but maybe if you like the taste of whiskey, you might end up having too many whiskeys.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it something you're always cautious of?
I am. Oh, I always. I shouldn't say always, because obviously there's been nights, but I do, and I did back in the day. But also too, there's sometimes, especially after a whiskey show, there would be a group of us, and you just got carried away. There's nights when I got home and the sun was up, and I mean the sun was up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what about in terms of the consumer then? How has that changed? I suppose obviously you're going to give us the American viewpoint, or even more regional.
I think it's the same as in Ireland. One of the last times I don't know if it was the last time I was in Ireland. I went, and I don't know, Serge, if you were with us. I'm pretty sure Jason was with me. We went to one of the Irish Whiskey Appreciation Society's things, and that crowd knew their stuff. I would not have wanted to be. I'm so happy that when I was promoting and talking about Bushmills, that that crowd wasn't in front of me.
It must have been the Irish Whiskey Society, so
because they were amazing. They asked a lot of in-depth questions. They know their stuff. You're looking at the Irish whiskey pages on Facebook. Yeah, you see. Some of them take it too far. Where again, you can't ask about an Irish whiskey cocktail without getting attacked. Yeah, it's like easy. Like Irish whiskey cocktails, don't worry about it. Don't get involved. But don't feel like you have to post anything. But they do. But I think that the level of knowledge that's out there, and here in the States, whether it be Scotch or bourbon, the Scotch, again, there were guys 15, 20 years ago. They were already going over to Scotland and visiting their favorite distilleries. And there were competitions among groups of who could visit the most distilleries to try to visit all. Back then there was about 90 distilleries in Scotland. I think it's about 150, 160 now. And they are trying to visit them all, whereas, in Ireland, it's amazing. I could reach out to any number of you guys. If I want to know the inside scoop on a distillery, you guys would know it. It's a little creepy. I keep on thinking, isn't there anything else to do in Ireland these days?
Yeah. Well, the level of knowledge has gone up, but I think obviously we're seeing a younger audience now, and we're seeing more women get involved, I think, and appreciate it. I don't know if that's the same as it is in the States. And
oh no, it's huge. I mean, you have a number of female distillers now, which there's been a big push for. But actually, I saw it coming anyways.
yeah,
And there were female distillers over in Scotland. There were Bushmills had a female master blender for I don't know how long now. And then you have Louise down there at Chapelgate. And you have a few more too, I believe, don't you?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Diageo, of course, have Laura as well in.
That's right. Yeah.
In Rowan Co.
But over here in the States, you know what I think was one of the big push among women in whiskey was actually a lot of the women bartenders, a lot of women mixologists.
Right.
A lot of cocktail bars had a lot of women making the cocktails. And again, I thought it was great that there were so many bartenders now really wanting to know their stuff.
Yeah.
When I was bartending, including myself, there was a number, lots of bartenders thought Southern Comfort was a whiskey.
Right, okay.
I thought it was a whiskey. Nobody told me otherwise. If you went into a liquor store, you'd see Southern Comfort in the bourbon aisle.
Yeah.
And I talked to a store owner once about it, and he says, well, if I move it over into liqueurs, people say they can't find it. And I go, really? Well, why don't you tell them it's in the liqueur aisle, because that's what it is. Yeah. It's right there in the bourbon aisle. Anyways, a lot of female bartenders, which also probably, they brought their friends in. A lot of women started going into cocktail bars in general, just attracted a lot of women. Yeah. And, they probably went on the same journey I did, where you start off with cocktails and then you wean yourself off to all the sweet stuff and you just want to try that whiskey on its own. You go, oh, this is really good by itself. Boom. Yeah.
I think you'd be surprised now coming over. I mean, I think it was 2019 you were over last, but certainly the mixologists here are world class now. The cocktail makers, as you say, and award winning.
I thought I forget the name of the bar. It was I think it was a Thai bar, and it was off of.
Bantai. Oh no, yeah, I think off Wicklow Street. Yeah.
Downstairs, it was, and Gareth Lamb was there.
Yeah.
And Gareth, I thought Gareth was amazing. Yeah. All the stuff he had, all the cocktails he was making, and when I came over there, and they're telling me, oh yeah, we couldn't find anybody in Ireland, so we thought we'd bring you over. And go, oh my God, this guy blows me away.
Right.
He's fantastic. Yeah. And there was a number of guys, Paul Lambert. Then you obviously had Jack and Sean and all the guys up in at the Merchant up in Belfast.
I think James was up there.
I mean, there was a whole slew. Obviously, I came back a couple years. I forget when I came back again, and I met up with Declan Byrne of the Irish. Is it the Irish Bar Association or is it the Association? I forget. IBA or BAI. Anyways, Declan took me to all these cocktail bars. And actually, what's that speakeasy that Gareth opened in at the end of Temple Bar? The Vintage Cocktail Club.
Right. Okay. I don't know if that's still there.
Oh man, I love that place. I was going there every time I went to Dublin. I thought that was a fantastic place. I thought there were a lot of really great cocktail bars, big, and it's between that and the whiskey bars, and actually the whiskey scene in Dublin. When I was there, you had Temple Bar. I mean, Temple Bar in Temple Bar, and you had the Palace. And this is before they opened up the upstairs. There really wasn't a lot of, and Bowes. You can say Bow, the Bow.
Fleet Street, yeah.
But even then, they weren't, you go in, they weren't that busy. They had a lot of the bar, the whiskeys on the back bar, but you still saw most of the people drinking pints.
Yeah.
But one of the last times I went, Bose was even jammed, and you just saw all these people drinking whiskey, and then you go to the upstairs at the Palace that doing great guns.
Every bar now has a great selection of whiskeys now. But there are the specialist whiskey bars that are doing very well. They'll have hundreds of them. But who of all the brands is making big noise out there in America at the moment?
As far as Irish whiskey?
As far as Irish whiskey.
Tullamore for a while was making great strides. They had a big event here that was kind of fun. They had the world's largest Irish coffee.
Yeah.
And it was enormous. It had, I think it was like 7 feet tall. Just giant freaking Irish whiskey glass. Enormous. I don't know what they were going to do with it afterwards. I guess.
Jacuzzi.
Kinda. Yeah.
Nice.
But something happened. I don't know what it is. I think William Grant had some kind of dealio that you just don't see. I don't see as much activity. Then again, too, with the whole COVID thing.
Well, that's, yeah.
But I think even prior to that, I thought there was something not happening. Actually, Bushmills under Proximo is finally, I see a lot more of that. They also have Jack Ferris is over here.
Yes, yeah, he's doing a great job.
And you see him everywhere. He's doing
I think the fact that they've opened up their range now and brought out some cask strength specialist bottlings, that's certainly.
And I don't besmirch or begrudge or besmirch either one. Take whichever you want.
Or both.
The Teeling boys, because I think they've done a wonderful job as far as marketing, but it did hurt me a little bit when they release all these great old whiskeys, and you go, oh, freaking Bushmills!
You wish you had those to play with.
You could have done that, you stoops. Oh, yeah. One time I was with our man Cobus. He took me up to the upstairs Palace for the first time.
Yeah.
And said, "Oh, you got to try this. It's a double distilled, peated Irish single malt." And I'm thinking, "Oh, okay, it was a Teeling, 21-year-old."
Yeah.
And, oh, okay. So, yeah, it must be some old Connemara. I was assuming it'd be about right. They'd have time. And he goes, "No." I go, "What?" I taste it. I go, "Oh my God, this is really, 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 really good." Wait, who? What? Who? Bushmills.
Yeah.
Bushmills. And the thing is, Dave Brome had told me that Bushmills had played around with peated whiskey. I said, "No, they didn't. No, I would have known. I was over there. I worked for them. They would have told me." No, they never told me. Bastards.
Was this a double distilled or a triple distilled one from Bushmills?
Double distilled.
Because they didn't do that much double distilling.
No, they didn't. Well, I guess there wasn't that much of it. It was just one of their experimental stuff from the 90s.
Yeah.
Which they had a lot of, and a lot of it was sold off. I think the Teelings got from what I heard, I could be completely wrong, but I had heard the Teelings got quite a bit of it. But now you're seeing stuff that Proximo is releasing.
Yeah.
You go, no, maybe they have some other little surprises. It's about time.
Yeah, I think the giant was sleeping long enough. But Proximo seemed to be doing a great job of pushing the brand there, and I think the Causeway collection has done very well.
Yeah,
and obviously much of it there. But any other brands, any small craft brands that you're hearing about over there? Or Teeling are brand recognition wise are doing very well in the States now,
especially with teaming up with Bacardi.
Yeah,
so they have a pretty wide distribution.
Yeah.
Let's see. I saw that, I believe Oh, we don't have the conic distillery expression out yet over here.
Right. Okay.
I'm assuming, I think that's coming in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Well, their first official bottling is coming in of their own spirit is coming in the next few months. They've done some very nice sourced releases for sure.
Well, you see a lot of Hyde.
Yeah.
You see a lot of West Cork. I'm trying to think.
Do you see any Waterford? Somebody was asking there. Do you see any Waterford?
Waterford. We just had Raj on recently, the importer, and he gave me a bottle. I have a bottle of it. But have I seen it out in the bars? No. And have I seen a lot of advertising for it? No. I haven't seen a lot of advertising for Irish whiskey in general, probably outside of Bushmills and maybe some Jameson.
Yeah.
And Teeling.
Yeah. So what are the big challenges for these emerging and new distilleries coming here and getting into the US?
You know what? I don't see it's not really a big challenge. Only because I know every distributor wants Irish whiskey.
Right.
There is a big clamoring for something new. Everybody wants an Irish whiskey. Everyone wants to fill that gap in their portfolios.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many folks out there are familiar with the 3-tiered system here in the States, but supplier sells to a distributor, distributor sells to the bars. So
there's no direct route.
And there's a lot more distributors, at least around here in Illinois and around Chicago, that if they don't have an Irish whiskey, and especially, it's funny, you can really make a killing. Say January through March in a usual year with Irish whiskey, leading up to St. Patty's Day. I mean, if you can get your stuff into bars and stores and get the word out. For a while, Bar and Uske did. The
Wicklow one.
Yeah, they had some movement over here, and then I haven't heard much from Jason. His brand. I don't know whether that was just a local thing. Your brand can also, survive or die in the vine due to the distributors' ebbs and flow. I mean, distributors can go under, or all of a sudden they're not selling your brand like they should. But if I were a small brand, like I know, I don't think Peter Mulryan's stuff is out here yet.
Right.
If that gets here, I mean, I think he'll do very well. Peter's very active, I know, on LinkedIn, and he's very, well regarded. So I'm sure a lot of folks.
We had him on a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
So,
and then I'm trying to think of who. Is there anybody I'm missing? Liberty, the Dublin Liberty's whiskey had a nice launch, but then again, you got to have follow through. And any brands out there, if you are looking to launch your stuff over here, what you got to do is then turn around and make sure you have some bodies, some feet on the ground.
Right.
Support it.
Okay.
I mean, one of the big things that I don't know if you guys still have it in Ireland is that whole kind of the grad school program.
It still exists, but obviously it's gonna miss now with what's happened over the last couple of years. But I think Board Bia have that program. The food board here helped promote that, and I think it's been cut back a little bit. But there was and Jameson and some of the bigger companies have their own graduate program as well,
right,
which is hugely successful.
Totally.
A question in here from Graham about Irish pot still whiskey. Is it recognized and seen in the US?
I think there's a pocket. I think it's what single malt Scotch whiskey was in the early 90s, mid 90s.
Right.
I think there's folks who appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, but you got to remember too. I mean, what are total sales of Irish whiskey, and then you got to figure, okay, not only a small group of that, because there's not that much. Yeah, got some new single pot still coming out, but Redbreast always seems to be in great demand, but short supply.
Yeah. I mean, the Irish sales figures, whiskey-wise, were over $1 billion in 2020, despite the.
You mean dollars?
Dollars, yeah.
But I mean, case-wise, what are you at? Was it 10 or 11 million?
I don't know if it's that big for the States.
No, I mean globally.
Worldwide?
Yeah, I think it's globally. Isn't it
11 it's about 11 or 12 million, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not huge. If you consider Johnny Walker alone sells nearly 20 million cases.
Yeah.
So compare that. Now, that's just Johnny Walker. Think of the rest of Scotch whiskey. And think of all of bourbon. It's, and then of 12 million cases of Irish whiskey, how much of that is single pot still? And how many people then, you figure, how many folks have tried it? I think it will be, just like it's over in Ireland. I mean, I think that's all I ever hear about on a lot of those blogs, a lot of those whiskey groups is single pot still. Everybody wants to have a single pot still. But then again, you have a lot of new guys making it. Is that stuff going to be good?
Yeah.
Is it going to hold up to people's expectations?
Well, it's still early days, so we won't know the answer to that for, a few years. There's a few that came out, but...
Right. Well, I mean, that's just it. So back in the 90s, you had single malt Scotch. Well, single malt Scotch had been produced for centuries, right? And they were available in other parts of the world for a long, long time. But so once they hit the U.S., these were good-to-go products. You either liked it or you didn't, but, that was that. You have a lot of guys who, their whiskey is going to be compared to either Green Spot or to Redbreast.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. But I think that there you go. There's a story to tell, and what Fiona's doing with pot still, and what I know. I always share Peter Mulryan's blog about single pot still. It gets a good reaction, especially on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
among business
I
folks.
see you're active on LinkedIn mostly.
I am.
Yeah.
Well,
tell me your current role now. How did you get to be the brand representative and ambassador for Glencairn?
Had to sleep with a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people.
Did it work? It worked.
It worked. Actually, back in my Diageo days, I started working at all the whiskey festivals.
Yeah.
And so this coincided with the birth of the Glencairn glass. Glencairn developed the glass in 2000. And in 2001, it had its coming out party at Whiskey Fest.
Yeah.
First big Whiskey Fest and Whiskey Alive. And I met Raymond Davidson and his son Scott Davidson at these events, and I became good friends with them. I eventually met Paul Davidson and Andy Davidson, so all three sons. And anytime I was over in Scotland, I went to go visit with them. I'd visit with them, I'd stay with them, and so we all became really good friends. And then I don't know what the hell I was doing in 2014. I had just left the for 18 glorious months. By the way, just to fill up my CV. Was National Brand Ambassador for Benedictine.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Tour. It was 18 glorious months. And it's funny, the French are wonderful people, but they're not Irish or Scots. So I really miss working for the Irish and the Scots. That job went away, and I don't know what I was doing for about a year. I was making ends meet, doing different things. doing classes and working for various brands on a part-time basis. And then about August 2014, Andy Davidson came over. He was getting married, and he was their sole brand representative for the world. And he just couldn't do the traveling anymore. There was just too much, especially with a new wife on the way. So he said, Marty, with your nose so bright, won't you guide our slate tonight? He asked if I want to represent the glass in North America. I said, sure, that sounds fun. And it has been. It's been really great. One, they're sweet, wonderful people. They've been really, really kind to me, very nice to me. They've taken care of me. And I have a cool job where I travel the country or two countries, and hopefully maybe even South America soon.
Okay.
We were kind of chatting about, South America needs love. But I go to whiskey shows all over the country. And when I go to the whiskey shows, I give myself a couple more extra days and go visit all the distilleries around there, see if they need the glass. I also, at the same time, I was co-producing the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo.
Yes.
So
that's not been on for the last 2 years, is it?
Well,
or 2019.
It was 2019 was the last one.
Yeah.
Obviously, nothing was on last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to do it. I'm no longer associated, though my niece has taken over my role as co-producer along with Mr. Dave Schmier. Dave was the founder of Redemption Rye. He sold that. Now he has Tumbling Dice and Deadwood Bourbon. Anyways, those two co-produced the last Indie Spirit Expo. It's a fun event, folks. If anyone is in the Chicago area in September, it's usually in September. We had up to 150 different exhibitors from around the world.
I mean, it must be one of the world's largest with that many independents. As an independent event.
It's funny. It is as far as exhibitors.
Yeah.
You know, as far as trade, we try to get people to come in, but we have like no budget.
Right.
Again, I promote it on social media. However, it was very popular among the trade, among bars, and restaurants, and importers and distributors. So they would come, and the brands love that because a small little brand comes to Chicago, basically stays overnight. And I remember one brand was telling me, said we made 40 placements in one day. That's unheard of.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you couldn't do that if you were like one brand and you wanted to. You'd had to hit like 8 accounts a day.
Yeah.
During the course of a week to do that.
So do you miss all the travel and getting out?
I do.
You like the travel? It doesn't burden you?
So this past month in January, I would have been in Victoria, British Columbia. They have a wonderful whiskey event, something that I think Irish Whiskey Magazine should get involved with.
All right, okay.
I think they'd be very, very interested.
Maybe in the future. Yeah.
And then there's this great little event in Galena, Illinois. It's called the Galena Whiskey Weekend.
Right.
Which the Blum Brothers Distillery teams up with a liquor store and a whiskey bar. And they hold this event in this old town hall. And this is an old Civil War kind of town. It's really cool looking. And so it's in this old town hall. Looks like a church steeple. And it's really snowy. And so, yeah, you're trudging through the snow, climbing up a hill to get up to the town hall. I almost died doing it.
Are you exaggerating?
Well, I felt like I was going to die. It was just, I looked up on Google Maps. I'm staying at Mike Blum has a really cool Airbnb above his garage. So I was staying there and I was looking and I said, okay, it says it's like a half mile. It's half mile as the crow flies. Okay, I'll just walk it. So I walked, but you have to walk across this park and there was a huge snowstorm. just prior, and so the snow was waist deep, and it's kind of uphill. A lot of it's uphill.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to die. I'm not a fit man anymore.
Well, tell me, while you can't visit these places, you've started a podcast called The Sip of Knowledge.
True, along with Lou Bryson, who's the former managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine, and Liz Rhodes, who's a former distilling scientist for Diageo.
Yeah, I mean, the knowledge there, the knowledge there is more than a sip. You need to change the name.
A gulp of knowledge. Yeah, no, the two of them alone are, I mean, I love to be able to pry open Lou's head and just take out that. I mean, I guess it's been 25 years now. I forget when he left Whiskey Advocate, but he's continuing. He writes for the Daily Beast. He writes a lot of great columns, and
a great writer.
And so the people he knows and he's met over the years. There's here. Hold on. Excuse me. You know what? Get here. Ooh, how about this?
I was wondering what the pitter patter we were hearing in the background was.
Get down, little fella. Get down, sweet. Yeah, I mean, it's been great. And then the guests, between the three of us, I mean, Liz has this access to all these folks on the technical side.
Yeah.
And so between her connections, people Lou has met over the last three decades, and then the folks I have run into my 4 decades. That's old. That's how long I've been doing this.
That's a while.
Yeah, old. It's hard to believe it, though, looking at this.
Not looking at that face now, Marty. No.
But no, it's fun. Yeah, if anyone wants to check it out, we're on every Tuesday. But every Tuesday, if you want to poke in live, it's on Zavvy.co, or you can go to our Facebook page, Sip of Knowledge. Or you can watch past episodes. We've been doing it since last May.
Yeah.
So there are past episodes all listed on YouTube. And they're all fun. We try to keep it light, at the same time really informative, especially with Liz.
Well, the depth of knowledge, the scientific knowledge that Liz has is unbelievable.
I just love the history of the people, the history of the people and the brands.
Yeah.
We had Nick Morgan on who just retired from Diageo after many, many years. Nick was one of my mentors.
Okay. So are you going to continue these on past COVID, or is this just a COVID thing?
Just a COVID kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, there's 3 of us, so all 3 of us would probably have to do it, or one leaves and the other 2 carry on. Or
no, there's a great chemistry there, as it is actually. I think and a great balance.
Yeah, I think so. I like to think so. But who knows? And Liz has her own.
I mean, Lou and Liz are very entertaining.
Yeah, I'm just I can't.
You're just Deadwood, are you?
I can't.
No, no. I think you bring it all together. It's great. It's a great show, and if anybody wants to join in and listen, what did you say? Zavvy is where you can see the recordings.
avvy.co.co. And on that channel, actually, you're also there's a number of other shows. Federico Hernandez does a whole series on rum.
Right.
And I believe there's even some stuff on wine and a few others, but I think there's a lot of rum stuff. We might be the only whiskey show. But yeah, check us out. Love to hear it.
In terms of the Glencairn Glass, then, is there anything new coming up, or is there? I mean, you obviously can't go to festivals. There's no festivals at the moment. You're not doing very many virtual tastings, or are you?
No, I do. I mean, I do when people ask me to.
Yeah.
I don't find them as fun, though.
No.
Yeah, I like seeing people and talking to them, and getting, most of these online stuff, it's, seeing the little private chat thing, it's nice, but I'd rather hear questions. I'd rather hear people's voices and see people's reactions in their faces when they taste whiskey or if they have a question. It's just, I don't know, so much better in person. But, whenever anyone asks. In the meantime, though, it's funny you should mention this. I don't know if I actually did mention this to you before. One of the things we're developing, because so many folks are doing online tastings, is a Glencairn tasting kit.
Okay.
So for, say, Serge wants to do one, and you had 4 different whiskeys.
Yeah.
So we'll have 4 little vials that you can fill up, and you can put, you'll label them yourselves. There'll be little labels, and it'll come with a little pipette, glass pipette, that has a glass, Glencairn glass on top. And it'll come with a branded Glencairn glass in a box, nice hard box, so you could ship
Post them out. Yeah.
And hopefully, I'm hoping, though, don't quote me on this. I'm hoping that the box itself could eventually be branded.
All right, brilliant.
The Irish Whiskey Magazine wants to do its own.
You never know. You never know.
That would look nice.
Actually, I may as well ask you, how has the whiskey glass space, and I know you don't just do the Glencairn glass, which has become iconic. I mean,
it is. It is. It really is. I mean, it's only been 20 years. And it's funny, I've gone into stores where they call it the tulip glass. And no, it's not. It's the Glencairn glass. And they go, dude, I run the store, and it's called the tulip glass. And look on the bottom of the glass.
Right.
Glencairn. And look at my card. It says Glencairn. But, it's funny. I don't know if you're familiar with the bourbon writer, Fred Minnick.
Yeah.
But he once warned me. He said, the Glencairn glass could end up being like Kleenex.
Yeah.
The brand name becomes the overall term for the product. So actually, Glencairn has been doing a lot over the last couple of years to really drive home the idea that no, there's only one Glencairn glass. Do not accept any imitation, especially from China.
I was really going to ask you, are you seeing much competition out there, not only from China, but across the world in terms of...
You mean as far as copycats?
Well, in terms of whiskey glassware.
Oh, tons. I mean, tons. Yeah. Obviously, you have that Irish whiskey glass.
Yeah.
And that's... I've seen that in Kentucky.
You're right.
So it's invading my space, baby. Boom. But no, I mean, I think that's great. I have no problem with all the competition that's out there. I mean, there's some glasses that I don't know if it's, there's some glasses that I think are just gimmicky.
Yeah.
But there's some other glasses that really have, some kudos to them. Some, though, I also think are way overpriced. Hey, hi, Stephen. How are you, little fella? I met Stephen. Stephen used to live here. Stephen Randalls used to live here.
Yeah,
it was. And he was a staple over here. I don't think his title is brand ambassador. I think he's a brand manager now. But he was a great guy. He was always out and about in the marketplace. So you should have him on and talk about.
Well, we talked about seaweed whiskey there from them.
Oh, did you? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyways, now there's lots out there, but we're Glencairn is also at the same time we're doing our own innovations. We do have the mixer glass, which was originally made for Canadian whiskey.
Right.
It kind of got absconded by the Bourbon and Tennessee whiskey drinkers. So it's very popular down there because it's big enough that you nose with the glass, but do I have? Yeah, I do. Here, I have one right here. Right here, I have it. Ooh. So this is the mixer glass.
All right. Okay.
So people like it because you can drop a big ice cube in there.
Yeah.
After you've nosed and savored your whiskey, and then even if you want to add a little mixer to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, not that I'm going on a selling spree here. Where did I put it? Hold on. 1 second there, mister.
You're not advertising now, are you?
No, I'm not advertising. Not at all. Oh. Lots of glass. Lots of glass breaking. This is something we just brought out this a few months ago. It's our blind tasting set.
Okay. Yep.
So there's one clear glass, but then there's gold and green, red, blue, and black.
I have the black actually here myself.
Black.
Yeah. Actually, it was pretty strange. They go very quickly when it went very quickly when it was announced.
Was that back in 2019?
Yeah, when it was first announced.
Yeah, we had no idea.
That's when the site was brought down.
Yeah, we crashed. I crashed within minutes. We had absolutely no idea the response.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it crashed. We had lots of people complaining. And also, it was funny. We were announcing, 1 minute after midnight. And people in Australia were going, wait, is that 1 minute after midnight Australia? And, I had no idea. I don't know. I guess they were talking about Scotland time.
But I mean, you do other products as well. I mean, obviously the central one is the Glencairn glass, but the decanters and all the rest, and the pipettes, and do you actually do cocktail kits or anything like that?
No, we do have some really nice cocktail mixer glasses.
Right.
We do have those. With cut glass. We have 2 styles of those. But no, we've never really gotten into the cocktail side of things. We have Glencairn originally. So Glencairn started back about 1981 when Raymond started it. It was mostly decanters and cut crystal tumblers.
Yeah.
So we have tumbler glasses. So you want to make a fancy cocktail, fancy Manhattan on the rocks, that's a great glass to do it in. But it's you'd have to be a pretty well-off bar because those things aren't cheap. But we just never really. I would love to see it, but I don't know if there's a demand, especially right now with so many bars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how much is it hurting the COVID situation?
Well, it's obviously like we were talking earlier about last year. In January of last year, it looked like things were on the rise. It just boom, the economy was fantastic, and we were expecting a really good year. Then COVID came around, and man, things just went silent. There were no orders coming in, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. And slowly but surely, things started picking up a little bit. And I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of clubs online doing whiskey events. Yeah. A lot of distilleries doing online stuff. And then came July, and maybe it was because a lot of states, especially out west, opened up.
Yeah.
Orders started coming in again, and they've been pretty steady. But I think there is a little bit of hesitation out there, only because so many of these states, they open, then they close, they open, then they close. So it gets a little, it's kind of
It's unpredictable, I imagine.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a distillery in Michigan, Journeyman Distillery. They have a nice big restaurant. At one point, the distillery itself, along with its restaurant and all the other things they have going on, they employ 150 people.
Okay, it's a big operation.
Twice in the past year, they've had to close down and let everybody go except maybe about 4 people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's shitty to have to let
Absolutely.
people go. 146 people.
It is a lot. It's a lot.
Especially in the town of 1,000 people.
Tell me, Marty, what's the first thing you're going to do when this COVID restrictions lift? What are you most looking forward to?
Stripping naked, running down the street.
Your normal weekend activity?
That's what I usually do. But I have to wear a mask. And
not just a mask, is it?
No, yeah, that's all I wear. It's just a mask. Well, I'm going to hopefully the whiskey events start again. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. I'd like to go do my trip over to Scotland. Yeah. Jason, hello, Jason. And if I go over to Scotland, I'm going to pop over to Ireland. Yeah. If you guys will have me. I don't know what's the travel scene.
Well, you'll be dressed at that stage, will you?
I'm going to leave that one up in the air. Little surprise.
Yeah.
I think airlines.
You said
airlines require it. I think, don't they?
Well, I think it's I don't think it's optional.
Yeah. Unless, of course, if they strip search me at the TSA, and then I'll just say, screw it. I'll just carry my clothes on. There we go.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to the whiskey shows opening up again. Also, what I started doing in 2019 is just creating my own whiskey trails in various states. I did one in Michigan, where I just kind of, for those of you who don't know, Michigan's, the lower half of Michigan's basically shaped like a hand, like a baseball mitt. So I basically just traveled around the mitt, visiting various distilleries. I did the same thing in Colorado. Colorado has 60 distilleries on its distillery trail.
Right.
Okay. And I hit
them all?
No. I mean, I basically hit the ones that were in the Denver area. There's way more.
Yeah.
Same thing, Washington State. I think they have 120 distilleries. Washington State might have, I don't know. I forget. I think it was 120. But if you go, and actually California has the most distilleries. Right. I think then it's New York. So I plan on doing that, trying to hit a couple of markets, go visit the distilleries. Hopefully they're open and they're in good shape. I mean, I really, really hope that a lot of these distilleries reopen and these folks are.
What do you do when you're not working? I saw something about cartoonist.
Oh God! That must be an old bio. Yeah, I used to do a lot of cartooning in my youth.
That's gone, is it?
Yeah, I never. That's funny. I don't think I've even doodled a cartoon in a long time. But yeah, I used to. I used to do quite a bit of that. What do I do in my? A lot of films. I'm a big film buff, so I try to seek out old films. Loads of whiskey books. And you can see them here. Actually, this is a poor representation. Got loads in the next room, just tons of them. And then and travel. Yeah. I was watching something. I think it was about a documentary about Rome. No, maybe it was Rome. I don't know. It was Rome. Anyways, I saw on the map they showed Marseille, and all I could think of is, I want to go to France.
Right. Okay.
I want to go visit France again, but I need somebody who speaks French. Who wants to go?
Oh, you get it. Everybody now.
It was miserable. I was in Bordeaux once, And I kept on having to call up this French girl I knew in Dublin. So when I was living in Dublin, I went over there my own, and poor girl. I was calling her every like 10 minutes. Going, how do you say spaghetti in French? I'm trying to order. How do you say, can I be seated? Or how do you say thank you again? I'm totally drawing a blank. So
you've gone off and learned French in the meantime.
No. I think I've learned less of it in the meantime somehow. But I'd love to try. I just love to travel for travel's sake, and I'd like to see a lot more of Europe. One of the things I did before I went to Ireland not last year, the year before in 2019, was pop over to Lisbon in Portugal. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Great food there.
Do you know Peter O'Connor?
Yeah.
So I believe, I don't know if Peter still has the place in all this. Might have been a bad time to open a bar, but he opened up a bar in Lisbon.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
He had moved down there and looked ideal. I thought, wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, Portugal is in a particularly strict lockdown at the moment.
Are they really?
Well, they went from having very few cases to having an awful lot. Yeah, it's worse than here, I think.
It's such a shame. I mean, it's such a, really wonderful people. I mean, I had such a good time. And I think if I went there, if I lived there, I would die of port poisoning.
Port poisoning and lovely prawns, I remember.
Yeah. Oh, the seafood. Oh,
yeah, fantastic.
So good. But yeah, I would die of too much port.
Yeah. So Chicago, you're home for the next few years. That's where you're settled. You're not moving from there and coming over for a couple of years.
You know what? If I could, I love Chicago. I'm born and bred here. It's there's so much good about this city, but I really do hate the politicians in Illinois and Chicago, and I think they're ruining both the state and the city. That I have considered moving out of state, but not far, maybe Indiana. I have an idea. So Bill Welcher at Journeyman has told me that there's a town council in the little town of Three Oaks, Michigan, 1,000 people. They have a town manager. And I could go out for that job, move to Three Oaks. Then you can buy a house there for like $20,000.
And you could make whiskey drinking compulsory.
Boom. Yeah, that's
there you go. You're onto something there.
It's required.
Yeah. That's only out of a Glencairn glass, of course.
That's true, too.
And only Irish whiskey.
And it'd be so close, and it would be the only problem is airports.
Yeah.
So traveling, I'd have to drive all the way. Well, maybe I can go out of Midway, but still, you're talking about an hour.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm 20 minutes from O'Hare, which is nice. Hey, that's something too, Serge. I don't know if you guys see much of this, but we had John McKee from Head Frame Distillery in the beautiful Butte, Montana. And he has made his version of an Irish whiskey.
Yeah. Pot still?
No, not pot still. It's not pot still. Yes, I mean, I don't even know if it's an Irish mash bill of any kind. You know, I don't know what. I think it's more in honor of the Irish.
All right. Okay.
Founded the city, but also too. What was it? What's the not Rogue? Oh, it's a distillery over in Oregon made. What's it called? The Emerald. I think it's called the Emerald, which is based on an Irish mash bill from the 1860s.
Was that the one that won the award for?
I don't know if it won an award. It's actually, you know, it's funny. I was drinking it for one of the shows we were doing, and you know, at first I didn't like it. The first time I tried it, and last time I was drinking it, I thought, "Oh my God, this is really good." I
There
don't
you
know if
go.
it just need a little airing, or if my taste buds have, just weren't in the right frame of mind the first time, but really good.
Well, Fionn says ransom.
Ransom. Thank
There
you.
you go. Well, if Fionn tell you about an American whiskey, there you go.
Well, I think we've talked about it. I mean, I found it really fascinating. I believe they teamed up with the cocktail writer Dave Wondrich.
Right.
And they researched. Now, I don't know, Finn, if you had anything to do with it, because I know you. I think he is. Fionn has every old single pot still mash.
Well, if there's an old recipe, Fionn knows about it.
Is he going to put out a book? Not his old book, but another book where it just lists all the old mash bills.
Well, he's doing the PhD research at the moment.
That's right.
So
Yeah, he's a professional student.
He is. He's and a very good writer.
He is.
A very
good presenter.
Yeah.
It is his BBC.
I think that'll be after June. It might be before. I'm not sure when that's going to come out. But that'll be interesting.
To see that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
You want to make sure there's somehow you mention me, or there's you hold up a photo of me.
In a good way. In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way.
Well, that was
on.
Yeah.
But I would love to. I'm really looking forward to that. I think that'd be great. Actually, there's some wonderful professional tax leech. That's what Fionn is. What was it? There are some really nice videos of. They're short, and I think they're 4 brands. I think they're 4 Middleton that Peter Mulryan had done.
Yeah.
At one point, and I think you can catch those on YouTube. I love finding that stuff.
Yeah. Well, look, I've kept you on long enough. You've been with us for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Which has flown by.
Oh, my God. I left the eggs on the stove.
Yeah, well, my dinner's getting cold. But I have a hot whiskey to keep me here. But look, Martin, I suppose publicly I want to thank you very much for everything you've done for me and for the magazine. I do very much consider you a friend. But I mean, the influence and what you've done for Irish whiskey in the States, and whiskey in general, has been phenomenal, and it's always great to have you over.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to you coming over with Jason again, and maybe do a longer trip next time.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, too, the other thing I had to postpone was a family reunion. We were all going to meet over in Mayo.
Right. Okay.
Probably in Castlebar.
Well, you can come over with your new president.
With Biden?
Yeah, hasn't he got Mayo connections?
Yeah.
You could even be related.
He wouldn't, even if he did, he probably wouldn't recognize him. No, wait, who are you guys? Hey, wait a minute. Hey. No, he'd walk into the ocean, and he'd probably try to walk home. He'd try to walk back to the U.S.
No comment. No comment. Well, look, no, honestly, I've really enjoyed your show. I think it's fantastic. If anybody hasn't followed it, a sip of knowledge is a very nice understatement of what you learn on that. And I personally thank you very much for everything you've helped us with. And,
Sergio, unfortunately, I think we're booked up for St. Paddy's Day, but we should have you on just to give a our correspondent, our Irish correspondent. We've had Fiona and Peter on.
Yeah.
Louis.
Well, then you probably need somebody that knows something then on.
You can make it up.
What do those guys know?
We wouldn't notice the difference. You could just make it up. So, we had a huge distillery fire here, and just use all those facts that Fiona knows about the old distillery fire in Dublin.
Yeah.
Just tell us it's happening now.
Look, we'll think of something to talk about. But look.
Green screen behind you of flames, and just pretend you're like the man on the street.
I haven't cracked that green screen technology yet. But,
really?
No, well, if I did, I would actually get it to replace my face and actually have something interesting in the background instead. But sure.
Little fella, that's so sad. Here, wait a minute. Here.
Well, look, thank you very much again for your time. Really look forward to you coming over, and maybe we'll be over in the States before you're over here. There's so much going on over there, and
That'd be great.
We get a lot of interest there. So
we'll get you, Fiona, Zoltan, Jim Clark.
Oh yeah, all together. That'll be a nice, quiet evening.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll rent a station wagon. We can drive around.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I'd rather. Yeah, I think some of us would surf on top. Okay, look.
Zoltan.
Stay safe. Thanks very much. Continue with the great work you do, and look forward to seeing you here.
All right, Serge. You be good, little fella. Be careful.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Stay healthy. A lot of vitamin D.
Bye. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I hope you enjoyed that. It's always nice having a catch-up and learning what's happening stateside. And Marty knows exactly what's happening out there. So next week, we'll announce who we'll be having later on next week. Thank you much again to everybody that has supported us. And we look forward to the next 5,000 more podcast downloads as well, and we'll keep the show going while there's interest. So stay safe, everybody. Sláinte. Take care.